Before we get into today's episode, a few things I want to say up front. Everything you're about to hear represents my own personal opinions and views. They don't reflect any views of any brand I might work or a partner or a sponsor associated with Loudlands, Khandie, me, the photographer, anything, okay? This episode discusses events as they're unfolding at the time of recording, and whilst I do my best to be accurate, I can't always be. I'm not infallible, but I want you and encourage you to go and do your own research and draw your own conclusions. Nothing in this episode constitutes as legal advice either. As I said, I'm just a photographer, an educator, not a solicitor. And if you have any legal questions, it is time you go consult a professional. But let's get to it. I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine you picked up someone's phone, a stranger's phone perhaps, and you're scrolling through their camera roll and you find over 3,000 pictures of women taken without their knowledge on public transport on the street, and some of them underneath their clothing, as in the camera has been swept underneath their skirt and a photo has been taken of what they see under there. What do you think? I'll tell you what most of us think. We think this person is perhaps a predator and we should be ringing the police. Now, what if I told you that these are exact same photos were exhibited in a prestigious Milan venue curated by one of the most respected names in Italian photography, covered positively by Rolling Stone, La Repubblica, and the El Italia, and described as, and I quote, an intimate and necessary photographic project. The same photos, different frame. That's what today's episode is about. It's not a pile on one man, but more an uncomfortable question underneath all of this. What makes something art? Who decides it? And what are we actually saying when we let questions, or should we say, let answers to those questions determine what is acceptable or not? Okay? Welcome to Loudlands. I'm Khandie, a photographer, educator, and the person who likes to say the thing everyone is thinking, but is too polite to say it out loud with my whole chest. Let's go. Excuse me, coughing. Okay, let me give you the facts because what actually happened, because context is important here. A photographer who works under the name Ray Banhoff, real name, if I say this wrong, I'm sorry, Gianluca Galori, I think that's right, spent approximately around 2 years between 2012 and approximately 2015 conducting what he called a street photography project in Milan. The project was called Fie or Fire, Fie, an old-fashioned, I'm told, slightly dismissive, but I don't know how true that is, Italian word for women. Okay, so let's just say it's a word for women. I tried to ask my Italian friend, and she was like, "Yeah, I think it's not a great word, but I can't remember entirely because I've seen it used in many contexts." So I'm going to go with, let's just say that it's just a word for women. His method, in his own words, he would position himself ahead of women on public transport, in public spaces, and photograph them without their knowledge, faces, bodies, and this is where we need to be precise, underneath their skirts at times, or right up close to their buttocks area if they were wearing shorts. 3,000 plus images, 2 years, zero consent asked, zero consent given. Now, this is important. He has described the origin of this project as a joke to share with friends on WhatsApp. Those are his words. It started as something he shared privately with mates for a laugh, and then, as his framing of it evolved, it became, in his telling, a serious artistic endeavor. Now, around October 2015, Fee was published at the Biblioteca della Moda, my Italian is awful, in Milan. It was published as a limited edition book curated by Tony Forimbert. Again, a terrible pronunciation. I apologize, Tony. A genuinely respected figure in Italian photography. It was covered positively by Rolling Stone Italy, La Repubblica, El Italia, and Artibune, one of Italy's most prominent art publications. Then, as recently as April, just mere 2 months ago, I think it was approximately, he was being celebrated at the Cafe Ghibre Rosa in Florence, a legendary venue, in fact, a historical literacy institution, the place where futurists once argued about the future of art, and he was there being described in the press as redefining contemporary elegance. So, as much, I think it was last week, from about the 21st, he appeared on a podcast. He talked about his project again, proudly describing the methodology in detail. And it was then that the Italian public in particular, and after then, the wider internet caught up with what exactly was in those photographs. Within 24 hours, a lawyer and a human rights activist called Cafe Latore or Tor, again, I'm terrible with these names, so you can come at me for all of them. I did try to find out, but there were many different pronunciations for some reason. Announced a complaint to the police, potential charges about privacy violations and harassment, from what I understand. I will just say a little quick check on the old Google said that upskirting itself is not outlawed in Italy, but it can come under harassment and privacy under the penal code. Banhoff deleted his social media, or has at least gone dark on them, and then published a statement saying the photographs were taken without breaking any law and that his intent was artistic and that he is, in his words, a man who loves and respects women. And here we are today. Now, the name question and why it matters more than you think. Before we go into the art question, I want to talk about something that I think is being underplayed in the wider discourse. Ray Banhoff is a pseudonym. His real name is Gianluca, and he has talked openly about why he used a different name. In his own words, and I'm paraphrasing for interviews he's given over the years, he said that with his real family name, he would never have done what he does today. So let that sit for a minute. Because what he's describing, whether he meant it this way or not, my interpretation is that Ray Banhoff opened doors that Gianluca couldn't. The pseudonym gave him a persona gave him credibility, and the credibility gave him access to creators, publishers, and prestigious venues and press coverage. And that access is precisely why Thea was allowed to be called art. Because here's the thing, the photographs didn't change. The act of taking them didn't change. What changed is the frame around them. And that frame was built entirely on who the person presenting them was understood to be. Ray Banhoff is a photographer, blogger, Rolling Stone contributor, and a man with industry connections and a curated artistic identity. Same photographs found on an anonymous phone would possibly be called evidence. That is no small distinction. That is an entire point. When we say something is art, we're often actually saying is the person presenting this has sufficient cultural authority that we are prepared to extend them the benefit of the doubt. We are prepared to look for meaning rather than harm. We are prepared to ask, what is the artist saying rather than what did the artist do? And with that extension of benefit of the doubt is not entirely available to everybody, and it never has been. There's a class and gatekeeping problem here. This brings me to something that I think is genuinely underexplored in the conversation happening right now. What we're really talking about here is cultural gatekeeping, and gatekeeping at its core is a class issue. The art world, including the photography world, has always had mechanisms for deciding whose work got elevated and whose work doesn't. Curators, galleries, publications, award bodies, industry insiders. These gatekeepers don't just decide what's good, they decide what's legitimate, what's worthy of serious consideration, what gets the benefit of the doubt. And it's those gatekeepers have, and honestly, they have historically, in my opinion, favored certain kinds of people with the right connections, the right background, the right way of presenting themselves in the work. People can frame what they've done in the right language, a sociological and aesthetic eye, residual beauty, an intimate and necessary project. They are words used to describe this, by the way. The photography industry, like the art world more broadly, is not a level playing field, and I don't think it ever has been. The question of who gets to call something art is inseparable from the question of who has access to the people and institutions that could bestow that label. A working class person with no industry connection, no publications to their name, no, curatorial. Is that saying it? Curational? I don't. I wrote this and I wrote this and I was like, I'm so proud of myself. I can't get the words out. Relationships with the same 3,000 plus images on his phone, probably wouldn't have got a book launch. He wouldn't probably not got a gallery exhibition, and he would not have been described as redefining contemporary elegance. He might have been investigated. I'm not saying this is to excuse what happened. What I'm saying is that I think we should, if we focus only on the individual, we let the system off the hook. And the system is where the problem lives and continues to live. Now, let's actually grapple with, is this art? Because I think the honest answer is more complicated than the discourse is allowing. Is fee art? Let's say, hypothetically, yes. Let's say the photographs have an aesthetic quality. Let's say that there's a psychological dimension to documenting women in public space. Let's say a curator saw something in them worth presenting. So let's give it a label. Now what? Because here's what's accepting the art framing actually requires us to accept, that artistic intent is sufficient justification for violating someone's privacy and dignity. That if a photographer has a creative vision, however retrospectively constructed, because remember, he didn't originally set out for it to be art, he was sending it as a joke to his friends, the people in the photographs don't get a say. That the artistic value of the work, as assessed by industry gatekeepers, outweighs the reasonable expectation of a subject not to be photographed up their skirts. Now, I will say it's not the entire of the book. It's not the entire of the exhibition. You can literally go onto YouTube and see someone flicking through it. You can see. I will say that they are probably the more controversial. The others, for me, in my opinion, are just snapshots. I know it's awful. I'm not an artist if you like to say that, but yeah, I think it goes back to what I said about him being able to carry the weight with his connections. I think this is a case of this, in my opinion. But again, these are my opinion. I've asked you in the disclaimer I put at the front to make your own opinions, and this is up for discussion, okay? And this is not a hate on a person. It is a discussion because it's very actively being discussed right now. And if you're not part of the conversation, that's fine. If you're not interested, that's fine. But I think it's very good that we talk about stuff like this, okay? And this is where it falls apart for me. Not because the photographs can't be called art, but because calling them art doesn't resolve the ethical problem, it just reframes it. There has been a long tradition of photography that works in the territory of the unseen, the candid and the surveillance. Vivian Mayer, Diane Arbus, Maury, I'm trying to think off the top of my head here. They are real and important questions about what it means to photograph people who don't know they're being photographed. It's about truth, it's about public space, it's about the relationship to the photographer and the world. But the best of that work carries an awareness of its own ethical weight. It doesn't pretend the power dynamic doesn't exist. It doesn't describe itself as beginning in a WhatsApp joke between mates. Fear doesn't interrogate voyeurism. In my opinion, it is voyeurism. It's just got a fancy camera and some framing. And I'd argue the framing, the artistic label, the prestigious venue, the name attached actually makes it worse because it gives the work a cultural legitimacy that puts it beyond the question. It makes it harder to name what it actually is. So, what did the industry do or didn't do? I want to talk about the people who had the opportunity to ask questions but didn't seem to, in my opinion. Rolling Stones Italy, La Repubblica, Ello Italia, The Art Tribune, Tony Foran, the Biblica della Moda, the Cafe Gibu. Oh, I can't even say these words. I'm so sorry. Every journalist, every editor, every curator who engaged with that work since it came into existence. It doesn't seem many of them did, or not that we're aware of. That's a disclaimer I need to put. Did any of these women consent to being photographed? Did they consent to appearing in the book, an exhibition? Did they know these images existed of them? It's a curious thing. I wondered how many asked. And look, I want to be fair here. Conversations back when this was created possibly weren't as prominent as they are now. The discourse has shifted significantly. Some of what happened then reflects the assumption of that moment and not necessarily active malice, okay? But that's the thing. The women being photographed didn't get the benefit of historical context. They didn't get to say, well, it was 2015 and people didn't know about these things. The photographs of them still exist. They are still being published, sold, and exhibited. And the industry has enabled all of that, that provided the cultural infrastructure for this to be called art. It needs to reckon with its role in that, not just Banhoff. Because this is a pattern, and it's always the pattern. In every industry where creative work has been used to justify harm, there's always a surrounding ecosystem that's made it possible. I know this episode's deep. I really went in on this. So I know if it's not for you and it's heavy going, but I really love these topical debates. And often I get to talk about quite frivolous things and marketing, but I love these ones where I really have to flex my grey matter to write these scripts because everything's scripted and I have to keep checking and checking. So if there's any errors in this, please comment for me to correct because I think it's important. And I'm only one person, okay? Agents, editors, gallerists, journalists who looked at something uncomfortable and decided their job was to find the meaning in it rather than ask the hard questions. We are part of that ecosystem, the photography community, and we have responsibility to ask those questions too, not just when something blows off the internet, which is ironically why I'm doing this, but when it gets a gallery show. Now, I want to address something very directly because I think it's incredibly important. And this episode is not a pile on Ray. Okay, there are real conversations to be had here where legitimate accountability ends and mob behavior starts to begin. Threats and abuse are never acceptable. If someone's sending these threats, that's wrong. Full stop. It doesn't serve the argument, and it undermines the legitimate critique of this. I am conscious that in the current climate, controversy online can move faster than facts. I want to be precise. What I'm discussing here is based on his words, his descriptions of his own methodology. But calling for legal accountability when potential legal violations have occurred is not a pylon. That is the system working as intended. And the broader conversation, the anger, if you like, the reckoning, that's what accountability looks like when the industry fails to apply it in real time. My concern is if we make Banhoff the entire story, we let everyone else off. The creators, the publishers, the press, the gatekeeping system that decided his work deserved legitimacy. They are the story. Remember, think back if we found this on someone's phone. And more broadly, the question this rises on how we as an industry decide what's acceptable, whose work gets elevated, and who benefits from the artistic label. That question doesn't go away when that particular news cycle does. What does that mean for us? What can we actually do about this? There's a few things I think that are worth sitting with. One, ask the phone test. Because before you share, celebrate, or platform any work, ourselves, if you found these photos on someone's phone, what would you think? If the answer changes depending on who took them and what label is attached, that's worth examining. The photographs don't change. It's the view in which we look at them that does. Understanding what art is doing is two. The artistic label isn't a moral free pass. It never has been, and it's a framing device. It shapes how we look at something, but it doesn't change what was done to make it. Ask not, is this art, but what did making this require? Who paid the cost? Did they consent to paying it? Three, question the gatekeepers, including yourself. Come with that. Who gets the benefit of the doubt and why? We will keep having versions of these conversations until the end of time. And the work is to change the conditions and not just respond to the symptoms. Okay, let me land this. A question I started with: would you call it art if you found it on a phone? My honest answer is I probably wouldn't. I would think we all know that. And I think the discomfort of knowing that while simultaneously watching an industry give it a gallery show and a glowing write up is exactly the discomfort we need to sit in. I will say they're not the entirety of the project. They aren't. There's a few in there, but the fact is a few too many. The other ones for me are a bit snapshotty. I'm not an artistic critique apparently, but I was a bit like that. Got a book, but who knows? Maybe I don't see it as I'm meant to. The problem isn't just one photographer and one project. The problem is a system that hands certain people the keys to legitimacy and then acts surprised when those keys get misused. We can be angry about what happened and we should be, but let's make sure the anger is pointed in the right direction, not just at an individual, but at everything around him that allowed it to be possible and continue to be displayed. I'm Khandie. This is the Loud Lens. As always, think about it, talk about it, and let's not stop the conversation when the algorithm moves on. And just a reminder, everything in this episode reflects my own personal opinions and should not be representative of any brand, partner, or sponsor involved with me in any capacity. Information was as accurate as I would deemed it to be at the time of recording it, but then again, this is a developing situation, so check all current sources for the latest. Nothing here is legal advice. And for legal guidance, always consult a qualified solicitor or a legal professional. But as ever, take care. Take care.